a round of applause. Thank you very
Good morning and welcome to the Ghana Center for Democratic Development. They didn't tell me I was going to give any opening remarks. I just assumed that maybe because I'm executive director, I must always speak first. I don't know why that is the case. But welcome. Today we are delighted to have one of our own, a senior fellow, a very well-respected expert in the area of education. Many of you probably do not know him, and if you don't, it means that you have not been having begun here several years back at UCC. So he comes to us, and then as soon as he indicated he was coming home, I thought, well, let us poach him before anybody else does. So he was gracious enough to agree to become a senior fellow at the center, focusing on social policy with a special focus on education. He also happened to, I think, when the current government came to power, and that's when I knew that the guy, he was all over the place before I even knew him. I mean, when they started forming the various committees to handle some of the big ticket issues for government, he was, I think I saw his name, he was going to give the keynote speech on the education special committee that had been set up for education. I said, okay, these people also know my man, So he's a big name in the field, and we are deeply honored to have him back home in Ghana, contributing to policy discourses around education. And as you can tell, his interests clearly overlap from the topic, clearly overlap with our own interest in matters of social justice, public policy, good governance, and the like. So he will be speaking to this topic, Reconceptualizing the Learning Crisis for Social Justice, right? And I think it's appropriate. I like the way it's for social justice, right? Sometimes we do these things almost without a goal in mind, right? Social justice in our system is a critical issue for us. Inequality and the various forms in which it expresses itself is really a critical issue for those of us who take the education issue seriously. You would find similar issues, of course, in health, in almost all of the other social policy areas. But our immediate concern today is to look at the ways in which the crisis in education and learning impact social justice and how we might reframe or reformulate our thinking around it in order to enhance social justice in Ghana. So I am very delighted, as I indicated, to have Professor Kwame Champong today speak to this issue. We hope that we can fill all of the chairs. I suspect that it is also being live streamed. So these days the technologies enable people to sit in the comfort of their homes and offices and participate in the conversation. Our target audience for this is really the policy establishment. We don't do these things just for doing sake. We want the people who make decisions, the decision makers, those who allocate resources, who make policy in these areas, to pay attention to these conversations. It's critical to the progress of the country. As I like to say, maybe the politicians may not be happy with it, but I like to say, power is not knowledge, right? Power is not knowledge. What we try to do at CDD is to bring the two together, right? You are a power because you are a politician, or you are in a particular office, which is great. In our democracy, we want those people. We choose people to do that. People are appointed to power to do certain things. But that is not sufficient, right? There are others who also may not be in power, but know certain things that those of you in power need to make the right decisions for the country, to make the right resource allocation decisions and other things. And at CDD, part of what we are about is bridging the gap between these two, because they don't always come together, or not always come together neatly. Sometimes you are fortunate to get a philosopher king who has power as king, but also has knowledge, and the two harmonize. We may not be that fortunate all the time. Those with knowledge, like Professor Champong, may reside somewhere else, may not have the power to bring some of their expertise to bear on our decisions. So institutions like ours exist to facilitate that kind of coordination. So I think it's important to us that the policy audiences pay attention to these things, because power alone cannot build this country. Knowledge alone cannot build this country. You need the ideas to mesh with the decision making, so that we can bring the necessary progress that our country very sorely needs. So thank you. It was supposed to be a short remark, but when I see Professor Champong, I'm happy. And I'm very delighted that he will be delivering these remarks today. Thanks a lot.
Very much, Prof. Pempe, for those not so short remarks. And so we have gathered here some institutions and dignitaries that I would like to acknowledge as we go on. So we have reps from WAEC, from the Ghana Journalists Association, Transparency International, UNESCO, NACA, IDEC, WILDAF, and the Ghana National Education Campaign Coalition. Also present here is the former MP for Tamale Central, Inusa Fuseni. Round of applause for all of us for making it here. Thank you very much for coming. Again, as the conversation is ongoing, like Prof hinted at, we are live streaming the event online. And to our online audience, if anything catches your attention that you would want to make remarks on or give some comments on, please feel free to do so. I would pass them on to our speaker to address them for you. And for those gathered here, I would urge you to follow CDD-Ghana on our social media platforms, because beyond this, we keep updating our socials with what we are doing. We are on TikTok, Facebook, we are on YouTube, X, Instagram, and we also do send activities and events and updates via MailChimp. And so if you want to be receiving updates from the center, please feel free to indicate it when you step out, so that you'll be receiving updates from the center. And so at this juncture, I would like to invite our speaker for today's lecture, Professor Kwame Champon, who is a senior fellow here at the center, to deliver his lecture. Please, a round of applause. Let's welcome him.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. I want to thank Professor Prempe for his very kind remarks and words, and also for all of you who have made time to be here with us and to listen to this lecture. I have been looking forward to this lecture because some of you may know that I launched my Chao, also very good. But I think at the bedrock of our education endeavor should be social justice. A lot of our development would be stunted if we don't use education as a vehicle for social justice. And I'll be talking about the problems we have and the challenges we have with respect to social justice. And then I would like to end with some of the insights that are in my book on how we can reconceptualize the learning crisis in a way which benefits Ghana. In the current dispensation about the global learning crisis, Africa takes a center stage. If you are familiar with the global crisis in learning, you would find that it's often centers on Africa. But there are issues about the crisis which are inherited as a result of our education system and how it was structured. And in the book, I and my colleague argue that the prognosis of the crisis, we do not deny that there's a learning crisis, and I'll be sharing some information and some data on that. But I think we have to ask ourselves the question, where has that crisis where has it come from, and who are responsible? I think when we talk about accountability, often we leave out some of the big organizations and that have contributed to this crisis. So I would like us to see what they can also do to address this crisis. Now, one of the things that I have observed in my study of education in Ghana is that often our policies are shaped by political incentives. And I'll explain that. If you look at what has happened over the years, especially starting from the 80s when we had some of our major reforms, there is a visible emphasis on access to education, which is right. But often this has happened at the expense of learning quality. And many of you may, or most of you may know about the free second education policy, politically very popular, which has driven infrastructure and development in the senior high schools and tertiary levels. If you look at the current government spending up to recently, as a result of this emphasis on free SHS, for example, only about a quarter of government spending actually reaches the pre-primary and primary education. Although we do acknowledge that there is a learning challenge at this level. Now, this is a very important point because as we get on to talk about social justice, you would realize that if we do not tackle the issues at the foundational level, we are not going to be able to address the challenges that I'll be presenting. If we are not ensuring that we have a strong foundation at the base, whatever we build for the elite, the political elite often, but we also build for people who, we leave out many people who could contribute to our development. And I've always argued that if we have this trajectory towards development, what we have is anti-development. If all our development is such that we are growing economically, we are doing very well, but leaving the majority of our citizens behind in terms of their contribution to development, then we are not doing development. My experience in working in many developed countries is that one of the things you find very striking about many developed countries is that they do as much as possible to carry the majority of their citizens along. We don't develop when a certain group or a certain small percentage of our population is doing well, and we are leaving people behind, a lot of people behind. The next point I want to make is about that we have been successful in expanding access. But the thing that remains a big challenge is that the learning outcomes remain weak. I started working in development as far back as the early 80s. I've been to many, many communities, villages, and towns in Ghana. And it disheartens me when you come to the stage in my professional journey, when we are talking about a crisis in learning, which we knew about in the 80s, and we are still talking about it. And I'll share some statistics where children are not reading, they're not learning. It really is very disheartening. Ghana should not be one of those countries mentioned when we talk about learning crisis. We do have everything, and I'll be sharing some examples of why I think we do have. We shouldn't be facing this crisis. But what we have is that although we have made a lot of progress when it comes to access, as as the slide shows, we have near access when it comes to the age group 6 to 14. But we still have a very large proportion of children who are out of school within this age group. But they also vary depending on which part of the country you are talking about. And I think we need to address this. We have expansion, enrollment increases, but still we have persistent large number of our children who are out of school. We have also seen very good progress when it comes to kindergarten enrollment, which has reached gross enrollment of around 122% by 2022 to 2023. The same with JHS enrollment. But there's a wide gap between the gross and the net. Now, it reflects as when you look at this data and the statistics, what this reflects that we have something that is happening. I'll be sharing something that we don't often talk about at the policy level. We have a problem of delayed entry into education in Ghana. And this is at the bottom. I'll explain why, and repetition. And these patterns that I'll be sharing actually do not reflect the problem with the learner. They reflect the problem with our system. So it reflects the inefficiencies that we have in our system when we cannot have true universal progression. So we have to look closely at our system. In many developed countries or many countries that are making significant progress in the education system, they have very good progression. It's not simply about enrolling a lot more people in school, but actually ensuring that the enrollment turns into effective transition from the lower levels to the upper levels. So if we are not very careful, all our policies that we are putting out are servicing the needs or are servicing those who are managed to get to the senior high school or higher, and we are leaving a lot behind. And I think this is what I often refer to as anti-development. Now, you think about it. If you have, if you're a millionaire, you have a lot of money, and if you drive around Accra, you see these buildings, these apartments that are coming up. You have a lot of money, and you want to invest and make money. You are more likely to put your investment where you can get the people who can give you your returns. So it is the reason why often rich people don't invest in social housing. They invest in properties that the people they know can provide, to meet that demand. It's the same principle. If you do development such that you have a small percentage of our population making very wealthy, their interest will not be on those who are left behind. Their interest will be those who are within their domain. They would not put up social housing for those who are left behind. The same principle. So it is not in our interest to develop in such a way that we are increasing the wealth and opportunities at the top and leaving those at the bottom. Then we leave a big responsibility for government, and for government to try and provide for the needs of those at the bottom. So I think these inefficiencies come back in one way to, we have a lot of success stories that tell us that we can address this problem. It shouldn't be the case that 60% of our children who do not make the grade. I knew about something like this in the 80s and 90s. We were testing children in grade 3, grade 4, whose reading level was at grade 1. In many communities I went to in grade 6, children's reading level was at grade 3 or grade 4. So this problem has persisted, and I think we need to really do something about it. One of the challenges we also have is our school environments and teacher deployment. This is also having an effect on learning gaps. Yesterday I was listening to I was reading an article where somebody was talking about a lot of teachers who are coming out are not having postings, and they are not. There's something about our teacher deployment system that we have to look at. We really have to look at, because I don't know, undermines instructional quality. We have to ask ourselves why this policy on secondary education. The average Ghanaian doesn't go there. And yet we provide a policy of providing access. This is why I'm talking about the historical, if you go back to the access to education. Any policy which does not positively discriminate to ensure that if I live in a village somewhere, I will have access to good quality education, that policy is anti-development. If you look at our development at when we had independence, many of our independent leaders, it didn't matter whether you came from a town in the north or the west or anywhere, they had access to good quality at the foundational level. They became our leaders. They became our leaders. Today, if you went to those schools they went into, the likelihood that they will come out to become our future leaders is very slim. And I think we have to be worried about that. We seriously have to be worried about it and pay attention to how we address that. I want to make a distinction between equity and equality, because sometimes we confuse that when we talk about social justice. There are two principles. One is what I've called the principle of sameness and the principle of fairness. Now, I want to focus on the equality of opportunity. Give everybody an equal opportunity. And I use again, pardon me, I keep referring to the senior high school because it's a good example. Equal opportunity. Give everybody. Okay, make everybody get free senior education. That is equal opportunity. That is weak. If you remember, it's a weak version of what? Justice, rights. Okay? Giving everybody that is, if we are all equal, fair enough. But we are not all equal. Okay, so if you give everybody opportunity, you're actually you're giving some people more opportunities than the other. And often it refers to education, in education, to inputs and basic rights for all. So the ambition to make sure that everybody has a good quality senior education. The argument, which is a true argument, that if you have at least a second education, in many developed countries, when we started in 87, in the 80s, the reforms, the World Bank and the development organizations were, so let's get primary education right. It's the thing we have to emphasize. And it is true, but I think adding secondary education to it, I think is very important, because it is there that you begin to develop the kind of skills that you need for the middle level and beyond. So that argument that we should have good access to secondary education is a good argument. But we have to look at our context and our system. It requires every school to have the same resources. Okay? So if you take Achimota as the yardstick, or a junior high school, that is very resourced. If you want basic right, everybody should have the same resources. They should have the same access to quality teachers. They should have everything. But the reality is that this does not happen. Okay? So you have to take that into account when you're thinking of your policy and what to do about it. Now, this is a point that I want to really stress in this lecture, that equity is a political choice. It's a choice because if it is something that you have to think carefully about, and really, when you make that choice, some people would not be very happy. Because when you are talking about equity, you are actually thinking in terms of, if you want to have a more equitable society, what it means that those who have more will have to have what? A little bit less, so that those who have less will have to more. You have to what? Redistribute. Redistribution is key. So you have to be prepared to give less, to take less, so that the other person gets more. Now, that decision, that principle, people would say yes. But when it comes to actually doing it, this is where we hit an issue. Okay? I, for example, am in favor of making sure that many of our schools that are, say, category B, we now have A, B, and C, we should not be embarrassed and ashamed by putting a lot more of our resources into B and C schools. It is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do for social justice. Okay? This is the example I said. Why is it that our old students are funding the senior high schools? It is the example I gave. If you are very rich and you have to invest in estate development, you will not do social housing. Very, very, very few people will do that. It's the same way that the old students of these schools want their schools to still maintain the advantage. So they are putting resources there. It is up for the poor child, Ghanaian child, government is the last resort. Government is the last resort. So it is up to government to make sure that its resources are skewed to benefit those children who do not have the opportunity to benefit from those schools. So it is a political choice. But the point that I've highlighted here is that it is not axiomatic that governments are interested in equity. This is controversial and work towards it. I think we assume that governments, equity, yes, we want everybody to benefit, the poor and all those people we talk about who are disadvantaged. But we should not make assumptions about that. Because when you look very closely at what we do, we don't practice that. And again, let me refer to the senior high school. Ensure that everybody has good quality in high school. It's great, it's fantastic. But you have to ensure that you do it in a way which is equitable, in a way which ensures that it brings along those who are unlikely to have access to quality senior high school to also come on board. It means that if you are in a position where you have to give off something, you have to. Because if we are to develop, and I think we forget that development is not about just, like I've mentioned at the beginning, just a few. I always use the coronavirus issue as an example. When we had the COVID and there was a problem, if you are rich, you couldn't get out, no matter how much money you had. You're a millionaire, you can't go out. And if you have to contain with the disease here. Okay? So is it not in the interest to make sure that you have the facilities, the infrastructure, to make sure that if every country, rich country that you can run to closes their border, you can stay here and benefit? Universal primary basic education in England during the Victorian times, the reason why they had it was in London, there was severe, people who were living around the Thames, there was severe pollution. There was a filthy place. People were dying. The rich were getting, then they realized that if we are to survive, we have to make sure that the poor have access to good education so that they can also contribute to hygienic environments, make sure that we survive. Our survival as those in the upper levels of our society depends on those at the bottom. Don't ever forget that. Okay? We should never forget that. And it breaks my heart, if I can use that language, to see that we have created these enclaves that protects us. That is an illusion. That is not protection. That will not protect us. Ensuring that somebody has a good education is your protection. Ensuring that you can give off a little. If I can pay, I have the resources to pay so that it gives government more money to pay for those. That's the right thing to do. That's social justice. And that would also contribute to our development, and I'll explain that. So when we talk about leveling the playing field, we should recognize that certain individuals, for example, I've used this example, students with disabilities need special education. Certain individuals need extra attention. I would like to see, I studied this when I was working with UNESCO in Paris, when we looked at the countries where they were doing very well. South Korea had a policy where the problem of teachers not going to the rural areas is not an African problem. It's not a black problem. I did some studies in the US, in Georgia. I went to some places where no teacher wanted to go there. And they were asking me, what advice do I have for them? How can I get to it? And I went to some of those places. It was as if I'd gone into the 50s and 60s. You wouldn't go there. Okay? We looked at South Korea, countries that were addressed. And because they were taking equity seriously, South Korea had a policy where they were rotating, taking the best teachers and moving them to the places where the students or the children were not having good teachers. But they were doing that on some kind of arrangement so that if you spend 3 years, 5 years there, that counts towards something for you to use that as leverage or as currency for your development. They had thought about this. So this principle was working. You went to somewhere, they were making sure that the good teachers were moving around. And you knew that in Ghana, if I went to Achurubanda, the place I described, and I made sure that children in Achurubanda met a certain criteria, made a certain grade, I should be recognized. That should count towards my development or whatever it is I want to do. That is really paying attention to that. And the countries that have made sure that they have closed the equity gap are countries that are actually doing that and promoting that kind of policy. But the next point I want to make is that there are financial costs to not focusing on equity. You know, the talent pool argument, that the talent and potential is not restricted and limited to any one group. When I go to some of these places, you meet very bright children. They are very intelligent Ghanaians. Don't think because they are in a rural area, they are not bright. If you have time to interact with them, their knowledge and experience, what they can bring to their education is immense. We are not tapping into that potential. It's going to cost us. Because when those children are then not able to get to the level where they can contribute to our development, we have to take care of them. We have to find ways of taking care of them. You know, and this would cost us a lot. So I think this really makes the case that if we want to really maximize the potential that we have in our country, it should not be in the top schools that we see. By the time those people who get to the top school, 60% of those children we were talking about could not read basic literacy and English. They are out. Within that 60% are very good children who could also contribute to our development. So I think this argument is one we should take very, very seriously. Now, I put, for purposes of reflection, this question, what I call the big policy question. And think about it. As a policymaker, if you're in education, this is the question I'll put. Should our policy be to ensure that no one goes without an education, or one where none has poor education relative to others? Okay? This is a question for not just a politician, but a politician. So no one goes without an education. Everybody should have an education. Everybody, whether you are advantaged or disadvantaged. Okay. But remember, when you develop policy around that, it is often the advantaged who benefit most. Okay. Or should we have none who have poor education relative to others? Now, that means that you have to peg the education of those who are, you know, what is the minimum? What is the minimum we should expect every basic school to have in Ghana? No compromise. No compromise at all. If we make that investment, I can assure you, it doesn't take long. Our development it is not, we talk about STEM and all of those, they are very important. But our development does not just depend on STEM subjects. We make that mistake. Of course, STEM is very important. I mean, how many people are going to get into STEM? You know, if you look at those developed countries, what's the percentage of people who are in those areas? Our human resource manpower, our base, has to make sure that they come out with the basic competencies that can contribute to our development. If you have a public message about democracy, about development, and the people you are trying to reach have not had education to be critical, to be reflective, you can shout and do everything you like. You just need a very clever politician to say something to them, and they'll all go in the same. And you sit there, the politician, and you are frustrated. Because can't they see that this thing they are putting around is not helping them? Why? Because your education did not prepare them to be able to have critical minds to engage. Okay? So it is in our interest to have a critical mass of our population who can reflect and engage, and who have at least the basics so that they can benefit our democracy. Now, let me turn to this. This looks a lot, but I'll explain what it is. And I want you to pay attention to this. Often we think about children who are in school and out of school. In about 15 years ago, my colleagues of ours at the University of Sussex, we developed what we call the zones of exclusion. I explained why this is important. And when you think about access to education and quality, think about it in terms of zones. Now, I'm going to paint a category of exclusion that I think reflects some of the conditions that leads to the learning crisis we have in Ghana. So we have in zone 1, and I'll show it later on in the next slide, This contains those who never attend school. There are some people who never attend school. Did you realize that there are some people in our country who never attend school? But there are those who could attend existing schools but do not. And those who are excluded by livelihoods, location, status, social stigma, and vulnerabilities. I don't know, but we have to think about and target. We have to think about exclusion not only in terms of somebody who does not turn up. There's that zone. Then we have zone 2. This includes most children who are excluded after initial entry. Now, this is very important. Going to school doesn't mean that you have access. Okay, going to school doesn't mean you have access. You can have entry, but you can drop out of school. Or you can fail to complete a full cycle of basic education to secondary. If you are in that particular category, you don't have access. You don't have access to quality education. Okay? So initial entry is not a guarantee that you would have good access to quality education. Then you have the zone 3, those who are in school but are at risk of dropping out. And this is where we have our biggest problem. Many of the people who drop out, the children who drop out in Ghana, and as in many African countries, happens within the early grades, by grade 3 or grade 4. A lot of the dropout we see, that's where they're coming from. Okay? And those who have not even dropped, they are at risk of dropping out because they are not learning. I was in a community where they had government had provided books, and we went to meet the chiefs and the people, you ensure that our children go to school, encouraging them. That was a message that it was a very humbling message, because I remember at the chiefs party, they would look at us and then they said, okay, we've heard all those things you are saying. When was the last time we had a teacher in that school you are talking about? Stay there. That's what they asked us. Okay? And he said, the children who go to that school, we are living in this community. Many of them, when they finish this, and they come and stay with us, and they join us in the farm. What is the value of that school? That's a legitimate question. Now, if you live in a town and city, of course, you make an investment in your children with the hope and belief that there will be returns. They are not getting returns. And you go and tell them they should take their children to school when they have a history of children going to that school and not progressing. And they said, okay, our responsibility is to make that the children go to school. What is your responsibility of government, of the district? That the teachers are there, that the teachers are teaching. Are they fulfilling the side of their contract? If you're a poor farmer and you have to live and survive, and you have 5 children, and you take them all to that school, opportunity cost on your investment in your livelihood. And then they go to that school, and then they come back 5-6 years and come and join you. What is the message you are sending to the next generation of learners? I've experienced it. Many of us here, if you have children, why did you take them to school? It was a risk you took. There was no guarantee that they would end up getting a job. But you know that education produces opportunity. So you did the investment. And many times your investment paid off. Go to many of these places, the investment does not pay off. Okay? Because the quality of the achievement is very poor. And attendance is poor, irregular attendance. And we call them in our research learning. So they are excluded. And when we are counting people who are in school, we count them as being in school and learning. But they are not learning. And they are at risk of dropping out because they are not learning. Now, I've highlighted 4, 5, and 6 because this is where we take it into the transition into secondary education and are selected. But we have free SHS. So hopefully, from junior high school today, we should have smooth transitions. It's not always the case. You find that many people finish junior are not able to transition, not because they did not meet the quality, but the other reasons. But you can be in secondary, and also you also have a risk of dropping out. Okay? There are pull and push factors, and I'll highlight some of them. And then you have zone 0, those who are excluded from preschool. There are some children who never go to preschool. And often we know that preschool often helps in the foundation. So we need to know these differences. Now that I've explained that, this looks like a complicated graph, but it's very simple. So where does the problem start for the Ghanaian child? Like I said, the first 3 grades, if you look at this, you see that the first 3 grades, the green line is the what we call the age grade population. That is, if you take the population of children within the ages of 6 to 14, by that line, that's what you have as they transition from grade 1 to grade 12. Okay? But in Ghana, if you look at it, at the top there, you have the blue where it starts. We actually have roughly equal number of boys and girls who enter grade 1. We also see that girls drop out faster than boys. But if they enter out faster, if they enter junior high school, girls drop out less than boys. So we need to get the girls into junior high school. There's something about when they get there. But if we lose them at the beginning, they are not going to get that benefit. So you can see that as children progress, we apply these zones of exclusion to the Ghana data. As children progress, you can see by the time they get to grade 10, 11, and 12, the senior high level, you see how many are still there from those who started. We have an issue of over-enrollment at the early grades in Ghana. Okay, and as we go down, a lot of them drop out. This is a picture of an inefficient system, a system that is not able to ensure that it takes many of the children who enter to progress and finish. And at the bottom, we have the secure enrollment with minimum. This is just a proportion of people who have secure enrollment, and they are learning, and they are progressing. By the time you get to the senior high school, look at them, this number, compared to those who started. Where are all these people? Where are they? And then we put all our investment for this group. You know those who get here? Do you know those who get here? My children, your children, they get here. Many others don't get there. We have to be concerned about that. This picture, if you take, data was taken sometime, but I hope it's changed, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not changed very much. As many as 2/3 of Ghanaian children may be considered excluded or not experienced successfully. This is a pattern that it often happens. You have about 90% who have ever attended school, completed primary school, it drops, progressed to junior high school, completed junior high school, passed BEC. You see that we have this downward trend in our system. If our system is much more efficient, we shouldn't have this trend happening. Now, Ghana has an overage attendance problem. We don't talk about it, but it's at the root of some of the issues I'm talking about. And our research shows that when you're overage before you start school, you have problems. Okay? If you are 13 years, and I've been into classrooms, many classes, if you haven't been, and I'll show you a picture why sometimes when you go into a class, you don't see 13, 16-year-olds because they all look the same height. And I'll explain. When you start school, our research shows that the effect of being 3 years over age for your age group, for a pupil aged 12 years, is between 21 to 36% increase in absence. You are more likely to be absent in school if you're over age. Why do you think it's so? Because your labor is needed. If you're a poor citizen, you don't attend, and you are 13, 14 years, and you have to go to school. Of course, you are useful in the community for your family. So even if you go to school, your attendance is not regular. So your risk of dropping out increases. Okay? It's a problem we can solve very easily. But this is a problem we haven't paid attention to. And we also know that an absence rate of the overall people is at least 39% higher than a child who is in the correct age. If you are your age, if you are supposed to start at grade 6, at age 6, and you start 12, 13, you are 39% higher of being absent. So starting at the right age is very important. But we went to communities where sometimes it's difficult to know the right age. You remember those times when you used to do this? Okay? It doesn't work anymore. I'll explain why. Because of problems with stunting. So children who enter school later have a higher absence rate. And the absence rate contributes to the learning crisis we are talking about. Okay? All right. Look at this picture. This picture is a picture of a class of children who are aged 6 to, at the time, I think, 15 years. Okay? If you go to many of these places, and this may look like it doesn't really matter. I'll tell you that it matters a lot. Okay? A lot of these children are overage. They are stunted. There's what we call stunted growth. And it had huge impact on your cognitive development and progression. So, now, What is successful education? I'll refer to this picture later on. In the research that we did, I talked about, we found that children who are affected by physical growth retardation are more likely to either never enroll. Remember they never enroll in school. They drop out before completing primary education, are in school but are not attending and attending poorly, putting them at a higher risk of dropping out. So the physical growth retardation, which is an issue, and that is why education, we have to be talking to the health sector. The health sector has very good data on children. Okay, anytime I go to a rural area and I go to a disadvantage and I ask the district, what is your relationship with the health sector? The children who were born in that community, do you have data that you share with the district education? You should have it. Every child who is born there, the age that the education people should have it. It shouldn't be the poor illiterate parent, how old is your child? Many of them don't know. And there's, this is 8 years, you know. But that data is there. We should share that data so that we know children are starting school at the correct age. Okay? But the disadvantage when it comes to learning does not start when you are born. It starts when you are in your mother's womb. And I'll explain that to you. So what does the overage, what does the research in Ghana, I'm just summarizing some of the issues we've learned over the years that tells us about our disadvantaged groups. We realize that poor nutrition and health is prevalent in our community, in our society. It is a critical factor because it affects retardation, it's what contributes to retardation, and then also has an impact on our children's learning. Their indirect costs still remain a barrier. Many poor households still rate costs as a factor. Even those who are getting free senior high school will tell you that cost is a factor. Okay? Overage enrollment and 8th grade slippage is very prevalent in our system. Poor achievement is common among marginalized groups. There's persistent inequality in relation to progression and transition. And there's high efficiency in the school system, which means that higher enrollment is not translating into what? High completion rates. An efficient system makes sure we have high enrollment, children are starting school at the right age, they reduce the risk of dropping out, and then what? The system is efficient to be able to progress them, to complete, and they have basic skills. That's an efficient system. If we don't have that, we have a problem. So what should successful education in Ghana look like? What should it look like? All children should attend school on all school days. Now, we need to qualify that a little bit because sometimes we realize that our education is not responsive to the needs of some communities. Okay? You and I can take our children to school, we come to work. In some communities, going to school at the time we've set here in Accra doesn't favor them. Our system, we have to be responsive to the context, to their needs. We have to have flexibility. What is the level of flexibility we have? We also should show that there's entry, progression, and completion at the appropriate ages. Because if we don't do that, it contributes to the crisis that we are talking about. The school-age children have to have normal health and nutrition. We should pay attention to health and nutrition. The school feeding program is important, but it's one, by the time the children if they are stunted, the food doesn't make any difference to them. Okay? So we need to pay attention to when the mothers are pregnant with the children and when they're, it is not just an education, it is a national development issue. There's nothing you can do about it. By the time the child comes, it's already handicapped. So we have to make sure that they have normal health, but even when they are in the school, they get good food and nutrition. And it's not just here. Sometimes we think the school feeding is just here. In Britain, where I've worked for many years, it's a big issue. When there was COVID, many of the children were going hungry because many children in the UK were depending on the school meals. My child went to, my children went to school. They were not given, there was free meals. They did not enjoy free meals because their parents, their father, me, they deemed that I can pay. So my children never had free meals. I didn't complain. Okay? So you can imagine when there was COVID, that if you're a parent who you are dependent, one good meal you get in the school, the school has closed. So people started opening places for those children to go to. They don't report it here. Often you don't hear about it. Okay? We only talk about these things when it's in Africa, but it happens over there too. So they made it, so you cannot say they are going to take part in the school meals when it is determined that you can afford it. That will not happen. The learning environment is appropriate, and there's good quality pedagogy, curriculum, teacher, etc. So I think the last point is that we have to have more equity, less variation in quality, plus the quality of inputs. This is very important. The last point there is very, very important. We need to really demand equity. And we need to make sure that there's less variation in quality. Maybe I can throw in this there. When the National Education Forum was, and I gave a short, I said to the audience, the president was there, and I said, if there's anything this government can do for Ghana for the future, it is investing. It is correcting this anomaly we have in our education system. It should not be ashamed by investing in these rural areas. The rich, we can take care of ourselves. The rich will find ways to survive. If we invest in those who are disadvantaged, they would come and help us in our development. We should measure our development by how well we do for the least disadvantaged. Okay? Have you heard this adage? As a parent, you are happiest as your happiest child. You can have many children. If one of them is not happy, you are a parent, you are not happy. Okay? And it's the same with education. If the least disadvantaged, the disadvantaged is not getting the best education, it should really ring bells for us. Okay. So we have a broken promise when it comes to education in Ghana does not enable our experience of sustained and successful learning. But the point that I also want to make is that the learning crisis is a moral crisis. Please, this is very important. It is a moral crisis. If we are getting 60% of our children who cannot read the basic, it's a crisis. We should not downplay it and just talk about how well we are doing in other sectors. It is a social injustice, as I've explained, and it's a failure to deliver on the universal right to free quality-based education for many poor Ghanaian children. Many poor Ghanaian children are not getting good quality education, and it's a problem that can be fixed. And then the problem is not that the poor Ghanaian child. You see, this is a thing. You sometimes go to this and then they say, oh, the teachers themselves, the children are not serious. The parents are not serious. The child cannot. There is no child who cannot learn. Exercise about language and children's identity. Exercise about language and children's identity. Now, I went to the radio stations and TV stations when I was launching my book, and I talked about this problem. And there was a pushback. And where did the pushback come from? Because those of us in cities and towns come from. Because those of us in cities and towns think that we have to learn in English, isn't it? And that makes sense. It's common sense. We have what I call common sense policies. Because our children are surrounded by English. Speak it, or even they don't speak it, they go out. You speak your local language with them, but when they get out, they have a lot of interaction. But there are many children who are taught in a language they do not understand. Can you imagine? I've been in a class where the teacher asked a question, and all the children are afraid to look stupid. One, they don't understand the language. And the first experience you get when you go into school is the language you don't understand. Can you imagine that? And it's the language you don't use in your environment. So please, when we talk about this language policy, put yourself out of it and think about the majority of children whose first experience of education is in a language that they do not understand. In Senegal, they have addressed this, and those of you who are interested, I'll share something. Senegal has addressed this problem very well, and they are making sure that in the early grades, children are taught in a language that they understand. That is the foundation. That is why we have that dropout there. You saw that graph. Many of them are bored. They don't understand what is going on. Okay, and that will affect them. So exclusion begins with language. You see this script here? This is a script of the Ghana teaching arithmetic in 1845. The Basel missionaries translated. They did not teach in English. Every book was written. They wrote it in this is Ghana. The early grades. The Basel mission, that's not what they were doing. And they were not teaching children in a language. And that's how we've abandoned this. completely abandoned, with the excuse that we have multiple languages, and therefore they should use English. Language is not just about speaking, it's about identity. It is so crucial to identity that we shouldn't. So our language of instruction is very, very important, that our mother tongue. And it's the one that we need to immerse our children in when they start school, so that we don't lose them. So it's critical for foundational learning, and yet overlooked in the learning crisis. But I'll tell you an interesting story. There's a revolution happening in Ghana. This is addressing this problem. Many of us don't even think about it, and we are waiting for policies for outside. The language is a bridge to belonging as a society. We should not think of it simply as something something you speak. Our social cohesion, our democracy, our development, our pride is invested in our language. If we get our children to learn the language, to begin learning in the language they can understand, transitioning to English is not a difficult thing. And we have research which shows that. And we have, some of you have heard about complementary basic education. We are proving that it is possible. And many of these children have been around to see them in Ghana and other countries, are learning. They dropped out of school. Within 1 year, they've closed the gap. In Ethiopia, we tracked them. They were performing children who were already in school. It took just 1 year. Why should it take more than a year for a child to be able to read and write? When we were working in Ethiopia, and we were getting children who had dropped out for many years to catch up within 1 year, they were compressing the 3-year curriculum into one. We ran into trouble with the Ministry of Education in Ethiopia. And they said, what are you telling us? That you can get our children to read and write and achieve the basic and complete basic education at a high level just after 1 year. Well, what it means is that spending 3 years, we can achieve that in 10 months. So that troubled them. But actually, the problem was a problem of efficiency. We're maximizing the efficiency. A child should be able to read and write, and it's happening. There are many, many places where this is happening in Ghana. We are not tapping into that because we are developing policies that focus on ideas of learning that reflects our experience. So they are using home languages, they are building joyful and relevant learning, and they are restoring the agency of children. The Ghanaian child, the African child is resilient. Sometimes, you see the child, a small child crossing the road. If you go to a development, they will not allow that child to just even walk out of the house. Our children have resilience. We don't tap into the potential. Schools makes them more stupid because when they come here, we disempower them. We tell them they don't know anything. But these children know. They have local knowledges. They have ideas. And the CBE programs, if you're interested in this, could you find out? We are turning children who have been out of school for 2-3 years, and they are achieving that basic literacy that we say after grade 6. They are doing that in 10 months. It's not impossible. It's possible to do that. We shouldn't be in the case where we shouldn't have a seminar like this in the next year or 2-3 years and say that 60% of a Ghanaian children. We should be embarrassed by that message. But it's a problem that can be fixed quite easily. And let me share this with you. Last week, or a month ago, I was invited by Lively Minds to go, and many of you may know about Lively Minds if you don't. They are doing something fantastic. But they are not only doing something fantastic, they've done something fantastic, they've translated, given to the ministry, and the GS is doing something wonderful with it. This is in Savologun, Antonio. And in these schools, the mothers you see there are either illiterate or semi-illiterate. Okay? What they have done, these mothers come into the classroom for about, I think, 2 hours, or a little less than that. And they have been trained to teach the basic literacy in the local language. So far, they have trained 150,000 mothers. Many of them did not go to school. And they are laying the foundation for that. You see that picture that they are working with the teachers. The mother is there with the child. Every community where you have decided this model should be working, if we do that, we will address that learning crisis within a year. These children, when I interacted with them, were picking up the basics. And these mothers were teaching them in what language? The local language. The children spend more time with what? Their mothers in the community than they spend in school. So there had been a partnership between the school and the mothers were coming. And when I talked to the mothers, they said they feel like some professional. In the community, they call them madam. That pride, the benefits to them as a community, it enhances them. Why are we not tapping into this potential? Why are we not making sure that every child goes through this program? And I'm very pleased to hear that this is going on, and about 150,000. This is where, when we talk about social justice, we should put emphasis on this. The mothers were telling me that there's no incentive. You know, in Ghana, everybody talks about incentive. And they knew, and then the people in the community would say, oh, you are going to do school to help this, what do you get out of it? So they would get, and I said to them, well, I think, and I said to the GS, and I said, you have to tell the community, you have to show the community how these mothers are transforming the lives of these children by spending 2 hours or so in the classroom. The teachers were telling me, we wish they could stay with us. Okay, so why are we not doing this to address the learning crisis? I think this is something that we can do. So I'm getting to the end of my presentation, but I think the thing we need to focus on in social justice, that we have to focus on agency. We have to develop curriculum that does not treat children as passive learners. Our children come with ideas. In our book, we talk about that. The fact that they are in rural communities, but our curriculum is often not designed. See, we have a one-size-fits-all curriculum. And those of us who design the curriculum, we are urban elites. Okay? I don't think you've gone to the place I went to. I'm trying to remember what do you call it? They call it overseas. I'm trying to. And you go there, and you that is real Ghana. You don't, not the villages you see when you are traveling around the road. This is where we should be putting emphasis. And we have developed curriculum that meets those people. Local knowledge is very important. We have to use it to incentivize and improve learning. Play, we shouldn't underestimate play. The African culture is vibrant, colorful. Singing, it is not so that the children are singing. We can use those things, our traditions and our cultures, to really leverage that at the early stages so that we stem the tide of the dropout that we are seeing. Okay. Social positioning, tap into the power of mothers, as I've shown here. In Ghana, we should use them. Don't say the mothers are illiterate. These are illiterate women who are being taught to teach basic numeracy and literacy, and working with teachers, making sure the children have the foundation. This is critical. Linguistic agency, I think, is very important. Feelings, making learning in the early years joyful. Many children, the experience of early year education is not a joyful experience. School is stressful. You know, they are in the school that is stressful. There's corporal punishment. They can't understand the learning. The teacher himself or herself has not sure of the language itself. So you have a teacher who's not confident of the language, and so the only way to control is to use the what? The cane. And the child also is struggling. So you see how all that mix comes in. But if you're in the urban area, you can provide supplementary support. It doesn't only happen in Africa. It happens in rich countries. My children went to public school in the UK. I had to get extra tuition for them because I thought to give them a little bit of advantage because I know the value of education. If you're poor, you don't have the resources to do that. So the education you get, you have to get. You remember the policy question I asked? What's the minimum? It should non-negotiable. Every child should have this quality access input, non-negotiable. What's the minimum? Have we determined as a country what's the minimum? What is the minimum? And I asked the policymakers, what is the minimum? That above that, fair enough. If you can give more to that because fair enough. But every child should have that minimum. If you don't have that, you don't have social justice. So as I come to the end, let's reclaim the response to the learning crisis. We must, what must we do? We must recognize and build on existing knowledges and strengths. I think we have to focus on holistic teaching and learning. If you read my book, we talk a lot about that. We also talk grounded in Ubuntu. You see, our cultures are communal cultures. Okay? We should tap into our community culture as part of learning. Okay, we are what do you call it? Individualized learning is important, but we're also communal. We should bring that into our learning space. Our children are resilient. Never look at any child. When you visit those children, that child has resilience. They have survived. There are many of them hardships that you would not survive. When I took my researchers to Achiribwanda, after the second day, I said, instead of us going every day, let's spend the week there. After the second day, all of them would say, let's go back to Cape Coast. They gave us mattresses. The villagers were so kind. They gave us good food, really authentic. You know, you look at the food and you say, this is healthy food. But we're not used to eating healthy food. And then the bed had bed bugs, bed bugs. And in the morning, they said, oh, we have to go back. I said, this is you want to send a teacher there, you cannot survive there. And you are going to research a teacher who is supposed to be there. Okay. So I asked them, so what are we researching? So what are we, and then we went to a place in I think in northern Ghana, and then there was the teachers said all they need is mosquito nets. And when we went to Achurubonda, at that time the policy was to give teachers bicycles. The teachers were in the forest. They said, we don't need bicycles. We need Wellington boots. Lots of snakes and the streams. So we have to listen to what the needs are and provide. Don't say, oh, we've provided teachers with bicycles. Okay? The teachers in the urban will enjoy it. But majority of them don't need bicycles. You cannot ride a bicycle in Achurubonda. So we have to rethink some of that. We have to engage the community as partners. The parents we're talking about, I said we should tap into them. We should train and support the teachers as capable. Don't treat teachers as if they don't know anything. Some of our training, we don't tap into the potential of the teachers themselves. We give them a script to go and teach. I'm always against that because in many advanced countries, they don't do that. They take the teacher as a thinking human being. Our teachers, we should respect their cultures where 70% of the problems that they were listing can be solved without money. Okay? And I was amazed at their innovation, their creativity, their responsibility. Well, what is it that we can't solve without money? Then we can talk about the vehicles. But we have been socialized and conscientized into thinking that all our solutions require what? Money. And this is also good for business. Development partners come in. Money is important. It is critical. But if we reduce all our problems to money, those mothers who were coming there, were they being paid? Who was paying them? Nobody was paying. But I can tell you, I told Lively Minds they should do, if you track these children, these 150,000 mothers who are trained, if you track these children 2-3 years, their learning achievement will have been significantly affected by what? These women who gave their time free of charge and help that teacher to lay the foundation for progression. Don't underestimate these people. It doesn't cost us anything. Let's encourage and incentivize them. And then finally, like I said at the point, we need more equity. Every policy, whether it's in education or health, ask the equity question. And remember, it is not axiomatic. Don't assume that policy makers naturally gravitate towards equity. It's not the case, or else we wouldn't have had free SHS. Okay? It's not like that. Okay? We should have less variation. If we are developing, the yardstick for our development is not that we have a high percentage of GDP, or a lot of people are, or you drive around and see a lot of nice houses. It's who we have left behind. That is our marker of our development. Okay? If you can show me that as we develop, we are bringing the large portion of our people along, that's development. Okay? We may have less nice houses around, but we have more people. And they are the people who are going to provide us with the growth that we need. Thank you very much for your attention.
I think let's give him another round of applause because as he was presenting, I noted that a lot of us were taking notes and nodding and agreeing with most of the points he was making. And so now we have the opportunity to ask him questions and share our own perspectives on the views he has expressed here today. And so we'll start with the first round of questions and views that you have. Anyone? First set, okay, I'll take 1, 2. So we can do the first set of 5. He responds to them, and then, so please, let's start with Rebecca. DJ, yes, your question, yes. So let me see the first set again. So we'll take Rebecca, take David, we'll take Prof,
thank you.
Nagrat,
I think I can
and
sit.
then, yes, that's in that order.
Thank you. I think I can sit comfortably.
Yes. The camera is still
Is that
capturing.
okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much. Prof, I think I just want to congratulate you for the work that you've done, very extensive and quite interesting. You touched on so many issues that sort of got me thinking. And for some of us that have been involved with some work when it comes to education, I think that you've kind of tickled our minds and to pay attention to the things that we don't. Actually, a book on inclusive education that one CSO, a woman who has been involved in CSO activity, wrote about, and that book is titled, it has to do with the school environment and how people are left behind. A very, very interesting book. Secrets, it's called Suspects in the School, Secrets and Surprising Solutions by Margarita Ubels. I think that book, I have read it, and it sort of struck me a bit, the question about the people who actually provide the education are actually happen to be the perpetrators and the perpetuators of the challenges that we have in our education when it comes to inclusive education. I'll be interested to know more if you have actually done some work also on that. I didn't quite hear something about that. And I also want to corroborate the issue that you raised about how education is actually framed and administered. Just a quick example. When I was in school, secondary school, they talked about the fact that some people did not know mathematics. So my mathematics was a challenge. I got out of school, secondary school, after my A-level, with barely a pass in mathematics. But interestingly, when I got to a university outside Ghana, University of North Texas, I had to do journalism for my master's and were to do statistics. Now, we had to pass math to be able to get into the next level. I found myself stuck, and I had to take that 3-4 times. Now, what happened? I got help from the very students that I was in class with, because the institution had what we call a math lab. And those of you who are educated in the US can agree with me on how some of these things are administered in terms of framed and given out, which helps to address some of the challenges in the system. So I'm just saying, collaborating what you said, that some of the challenges are as a result of how it's packaged and framed. Having said that, back then, the teacher said some of us belong to, so we were declared that we would not pass math. And so it was made up. But surprisingly, by the time I got through that math lab, I figured it out. And I passed because there was a system that helped. So it's just to collaborate what you're saying. And I just want to ask one quick question, and that will be the end of what I'm saying. If you can explain a bit more on delayed entry into education. You said that it reflects inefficiencies, not with the learner. If you can explain a bit more on that for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's a 4-in-1 submission. And so I would really appreciate it if we could keep our submissions very brief and concise. Yes, David. After David.
Okay. Yeah, Prof. So I actually appreciate a lot what you said about education not being suited to some of the communities in which they apply. Now, when you say 60% of kids, are facing education challenges in the country, I kind of wonder, is that necessarily such a bad thing? And it is in light of the system that we have currently. So there is the child who may, be facing whatever challenge and is not able to get it in school. And then because of that, he's forced to find his own way. He becomes a carpenter, he becomes a tailor or whatever. But then, he becomes a productive, responsible adult. And then there is the case, which is becoming increasingly what we are seeing, where you have the one who supposedly has the advantage of being in school, and then he graduates, but then because we have a system which is largely built around patronage within the education sector. And the education sector only caters, interestingly, to the formal sector in our country. This person also ends up at a disadvantage. So he has the qualifications, all right, but then he's not really suited to any particular sector, doesn't have the skills, and also he doesn't fit in the other sector, the larger one, that is the informal sector, which apparently employs about 80% of our labor force. So how do you, how do you create an environment where we have a more democratized version of education which suits everyone? Because there's never going to be a case where the formal sector expands enough to absorb everyone. And it can be quite, frustrating when you spend all these years in school and then you end up, say, in Makola, and then you realize that there are people there who have never set foot in a classroom, but are equipped with these, like, basic skills, which you, the one who supposedly knows everything, critically lacks. And there isn't an avenue at that age, to assimilate yourself into the sector such that you can, gain some of these skills. I see a situation where, as the country develops, we are going to be having lots and lots of educated idiots, people with certificates who cannot really do much. And interestingly, the solution we seem to apply to this thing is to get more certificates. So I ended up with a BSc. My BSc is not getting me any job. Oh, let me get a master's. This one is not working. Oh, let me get another master's. At the end of the day, you don't have any critical skill. And increasingly, the people in the informal sector, they are beginning to catch on. They can look at you and I masters. No. There's that. It's becoming a problem. And I don't know how, we can tailor our system to better suit this thing. Thank you.
I think the point is well made. So we'll take Prof and then we'll end the first round because of the number of questions. And then,
Professor Champon, thanks a lot. I mean, I think as you were making the presentation, for me, this is very autobiographical. It's almost like I could relate to every part of it because I have lived a lot of this stuff. I'm a product of Saito, as you guys call it these days. I went to a public preschool in Tema, went to primary school, middle school, public secondary school. In my neighborhood, in Tema at the time, in Community 2, there were, I knew probably about 2 people who went to private school. All of us, very mixed class neighborhood. We had managing director of Tema Development Corporation at the time. We had the member of parliament, I think Bruce Konwa, all of their kids went to school together. We all went to school together. Right? We all went to Saito together. So it's easier in that kind of system, I think, to channel public resources to public school to ensure that we all have that basic minimum that you were talking about. Now you have a system where most people in a certain social class and even below, right, have migrated out of public school and are taking their kids to private school of different, degrees in terms of quality. You have people who, in my youth, could never have thought of going to private school. Now their kids are in private school. And so my challenge now is, how do you rechannel resources into public preschool, into public primary and basic school, when people are exiting MP's kids, the managing director's kids were all in class, and competing. And so there was certainly a political incentive to send money to those schools. Our facilities were, of course, these are Kwame Nkrumah schools. Today, my primary school doesn't exist physically on the ground. is built in Nkrumah's days is completely physically gone. It's not even there. It collapsed inside. It doesn't exist, right? I mean, it's changed, and for me the real difficulty is just getting and since you said equity is a political choice, it is, right, at this point. But the political excuse now is, well, people are taking their kids out of those schools. So how do we throw money back into those places where people are not educating their kids? And for me, that's a real challenge.
For this round quickly, we'll come back. We'll come round again. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Prof. Yeah, I want to find out from you that I was at the National Education Forum when you made that presentation, very compelling point why equity should be pursued by the government. And I honestly was expecting a change by now, especially when it comes to free SHS. I'm happy Honorable Inusa is here. Inusa Fusidisi. Why do you think it's difficult for a political class to pursue equity when it comes to education? I'll give you an example. I have a boy in one of the senior high schools in Accra, one of the prominent schools, public school, Saito. And we went for a PTA meeting. If you see vehicles, 4x4, you think you are in the And how can such parents leave the school and expect the state to take care of the children? I was so surprised. The whole school was full, nowhere to even park your cars. Why is it so difficult for politicians to agree that at least these people should pay something to support the education system? I just want your honest view on this.
Thank you very much. We'll come round again.
All right. I think I'll start with the last question. It is a question for the politician to answer, but I would, I talked about equity as it's not axiomatic, and I think we misunderstand something about our behavior. And I'll link it to what, Prof, the question you asked. The movement of parents, of children from parents sending to the private school. By the way, some of these private schools, the low fee, they are, it's not every private school that is good. There's a semblance of, I've studied private schools, and they don't always honor the promise that they give. But it's an indictment on us. And Professor Prempeh, you mentioned about your time in school. And I said this in my lecture, that, if you look at our political class, around before independence, there wasn't any, you went to, if you lived in anywhere in the country you will get a minimum, a good minimum. Okay? It's linked to our development interest. When we talk about development, we miss one very important point. The development doesn't start when we have a multi-party democracy. No. The development starts at the basics. If you have something, that's what it is not, you have to incentivize behavior. If you have something, that's what it is not, you have to incentivize behavior such that you leverage. So I talked about my children in the public school in the UK. There was a basic minimum. If you want to add a bit to it, it's up to you. But the minimum was there. If you went to the public school, you get a minimum. So I think that, and I don't know, somebody asked about what the ministry, the government, it's a very tough decision, because you remember, if you decide to take from the rich, they'll fight back. Because you remember, if you decide to take from the rich, they'll fight back. It's not, don't sit down quietly and say nothing. Because if you want to meet the needs of, the free SHS is an example. Some people say, let the rich pay. Okay, let them pay. Okay? We can afford to, but when you're talking about the rich, some of you are thinking about people like us. No. We are talking about people like us. The majority, it's about 1%, 10% of people, when you rich people. They are below that. There's a gradation of rich levels. Okay? So you have to think about all those people and what that means for them. Okay, so I think it's a very difficult thing to do, but I think our policies must be, we the voters, see, I think this is about educating also about the public. We have to hold our political class but if we don't know the issues, we would not hold them into account. Okay, I didn't know there were 150,000 women who had been trained. I didn't know that until last month. Okay, we should be there telling her this is our development strategy. So I think, I've tried to put a lot of issues together. I think that we have to put pressure on our politicians to redefine what they mean by development, okay? And to make sure that we are redistributing, okay? And if you take from the rich, they wouldn't let you go quietly. Okay, but if you believe in that investment in the poor and disadvantaged is what ultimately gives us development, you stand your ground. I have lived and studied in many countries in the West, in the US, in Germany, and other places. It puzzles me. It really puzzles me that in those societies that are rich, they have policies that are really equitable. They would discriminate to make sure that people have at least the basic minimum, because that is what their society thrives on. It doesn't mean they all go to university. They don't need to all go to university. The proportion of people who go to university in rich countries is not, many of them don't go there. Why can't we do it? Okay, and I think we have enjoyed the benefits of that in our society. And we'll reap it. I told about COVID. This thing would come and and then we create those societies. Now we have estate development. Then we do a fence around the place and we hide in there, and then we make their place nicely. It's not development. You are going to somebody's nice this, and you go through all those bad roads, and you call that development. No, you have created your own mini this thing. But when there's trouble outside, you have to get out. Okay, so your development is not, and we need to really get our politicians, that our survival, our development is dependent on those people who are outside. And I'll throw in one last comment. And anytime I sit in traffic and you see those people who are selling on the road, one of my biggest concerns is the pollution. We are killing them. A lot of those cars that are, in London, you cannot, I live away from about, 100, about 60, 70 miles. I got a note from London that they know I have a BMW, and they told me that my car cannot be driven into London. Cannot be, I don't know how they found out, but they have their system. It cannot be driven there, and if I want to take it, I have to pay. They have made it said that it is easier and it is better. I leave my car there and I use public transport. Okay. So all those who are standing there, they are breathing out, and then they will be ill. Where will they be treated? The hospitals. So all the monies that we put in the hospitals are going to treat these people. Okay. So there's something wrong about not being us having that consciousness that the child who finishes basic school cannot read and write. It's not a question about you can go to Makula and listen. The world is changing so fast. The Makula today will not be the same Makula you see in 5 years. Even 5 years is a long way. Okay? So they need to at least have the basics. So we have to really push the political class. Let's not leave education out of it. The problem we have in development is not at the top, it's at the bottom. If you have more educated people, they will hold the political class into account. I know there are a lot of...
We'll do the next round of questions. So we'll take the first two, Honorable, and then Onside. We'll take Fred, and then let me finish with them, and then I'll comment. So we'll take the first two, take Fred, and then the gentleman at the back for this round, and then I think we'll be done with this. And we'll come.
So let me add my voice into thanking you, Prof. And I think I could relate to all that you were saying as a student. I trained as a teacher, as a member, politician, and as a parent. Throughout, I could relate. I really thank you. I mean, you've set me thinking. Is it difficult to come up with a question to you that we must? Prof, the schools, public schools are collapsing because the politicians have become the entrepreneurs. So those who brought the free education established private schools. And if you want an example, see me after this. And it's true. I've always thought of equity in education. I attended a school that was not listed anywhere. When I went to the Faculty of Law and I mentioned, the first thing, Mr. Bonso will say, oh, so which school do you come from? Which school do you? When I mentioned my school, my colleague students asked, where is it? But I was there. So Mr. Bonso told me, look, it doesn't really matter which school you attended. So far as you are here, all of you have been assessed and you are the same. Benefited from equity, quality, putting resources in that school. So it's important. Again, talk about resilience. Every day I wake up as a parent to send my child to a private school. I see small children walking to school, public schools. And I ask myself, what am I doing to my child? So we know it, but we cannot confront it because it's virtually becoming the norm. We know it. And they fail. They fail in life. Because even when they come into work, they can't manage their resources, their expectations are already high. We've set it for them. We know. My question. And there are many, many things that I could say, but we know. Maybe when we start channeling, it's about competition, it's about quality. It's like economics, it's about the product. Probably it will take a decision to begin to invest in the public schools and they start churning out students.
Baker, and that politicians who must make this work. And I was just, how do I implement this tomorrow? Because I'm seeing the reality. And let's tell it. So, Prof, I want your reflections around this whole concept of equity and how do we situate that in the education decentralization. Especially that you are so much concerned about language. Again, I agree with you there. And I like that powerful point of exclusion begin with language. And so my reflections have been around decentralization. How do we connect these recommendations, these issues that you have discussed, to that issue of education decentralization? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. And I think like my previous speakers, I can seriously relate to a lot of the conversation. But let me start by saying that both Prof. Prempe and yourself may have captured the conversation very well, especially the point about power and ideas, right? So those that have the power don't always have the ideas, and those that have the ideas don't have the power, and how do we have the two merged? My question would be around the issue of the quality of pedagogy. And anytime we talk about the early grades or foundational learning, the question around pedagogy and then the language of instructions are two key things I always try to hang on. One is in most of the, let's say, pre-service, okay, trying to affect or impact learning outcomes, especially in the early grade, you cannot always leave out pre-service. So how is the issue of reading taught at the colleges. Because when we teach English, we normally will do the usual comprehension and grammar. But in teaching kids how to read, it's different. And that's a skill that most teachers don't have. All right? And most teachers themselves also can't even speak English or comprehend a lot of the things that even they read. And I have seen this manifest in the classrooms I've visited for years. And so the issue of using the L1, I'm for it. But then when you come to the current argument where, oh, say, oh, we have a language policy. Oh, we don't have a language policy. Oh, we have a language policy, but we cannot implement, or it's not been approved. It doesn't seem to give much confidence as to exactly what we really want to do. And then again, the issue about many programs happening, at the early grade level. So we have different approaches. Can we have a situation where we harmonize all these approaches? Because sometimes you go to some early grade classrooms, you have a play-based system. You go to some areas, you don't. You go to another classroom, you have Jolly Phonics happening. You go to a different place. So what is the government policy around some of these things? Because there are different approaches being used. And most of these approaches are also not taught in the colleges. So most teachers, if you are not fortunate enough to be part of a project or a program where you learn some of these skills, then you are basically at a loss. So how do you harmonize all of these things to be able to improve the learning outcomes? In fact, that's why you have some of these kids not even reading and writing, because there's a lot of confusion in the classroom, right? And also, finally, government policy, because we've had ministers of education, and it's not everybody that believes in using our local language as a language of instruction. So that's also key in addressing the challenge. So I will end here. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Prof, and a good job done. Prof. Oh, okay, all right, okay, let me stand. So thanks, Prof, and a good job done. You started your delivery by saying that education is a vehicle for social justice. And I think that is very true. I've been involved in curriculum development for some time. And the question I ask myself and my friends is that, and for all of us here, that if we should ask ourselves that in the last 69 years as a country, whether the curriculum, and for that matter, education we have run for this country, whether it has done what we intended it to do for us. The answer can be yes or no. I don't really mind. What I mind is, if you say yes, what are the pointers? And if you say no, what are the pointers? Maybe I'll tell you what I think later. But yes, we are focused on the politics and business of curriculum for a very long time, and not really minding whether learning outcomes really change. And you mentioned some of the issues in your presentation. All of us here in this room, the curriculum that has shaped us from when we were in school focused mostly on the content aspect, that is the content of education, forgoing the socio-emotional and behavioral domains. So all of us focus on how many A's to make so that we can become lawyers, accountants, and all of that. But the socio-emotional and behavioral domains and values, we sweep them under the carpet. You mentioned South Korea. South Korea, they are teaching their learners to be empathetic towards the other person, so that whatever you learn is not for yourself, but for the other person, for the community, for the nation, and for the world at large. For us, ours is about us. And for a long time, we are not taking that seriously. And we are all pointing fingers at others. School trains the leaders who eventually come to man this country, can we reflect and ask how we are training leaders through school? Go to any, and it still happens, but even when we're in school, if you happen to be in any well-endowed school, once student leaders are elected, they have a different dispensation. They have cubicles, they stay in the cubicles, they are being served, and all of that. And so you see that as leaders, it is not because we want to serve the other person, that's why we are going to leadership, but it is what I will get. And it is all over. Honorable Nimsa is here. Was he in parliament because of the ex gratia that he's going to get, or because he genuinely wanted to serve his people? So that if today we say that we are not giving them any ex gratia, would they say that they are going to serve their if today, if we should go to any secondary school and we say that, look, you leaders we are electing today, at the end of your period, we are not going to honor, we are not going to dress you in a sash, and we're not going to, but you just because you wanted to serve, you are finished serving. How many of us will give ourselves to serve? These are the some of the questions I want us to critically look at. Because for me, I think that the issue of values is lost on all of us, right? And it is just how...
I pose it to be provocative. It's not a black and white issue, but I think it's just to provoke us to think a little bit about if we want, of course we want everybody to have an education. That is non-negotiable. Okay, but when you say everybody, we are not all the same, you know. So what is it that our resources can, we don't have unlimited resources. So what should be the threshold as far as unlimited resources is concerned? And so that's why, so the point you make, Honorable, is very important. And also you do make some very important points about the public sector. You see, behavior, I've increasingly come to believe in how you change behavior, how we behave. If we constitute a community, and there's a private school here and there's a public school here, and we see that that public school is generating results, okay, but it doesn't have fancy things. But you have a private school, it's a lot of fancy things. Where would you take your child? You go to the public school. It's not that there's something inherently bad about a public school. There's nothing, you know. Many people went to public schools. I went to a public school. We didn't question. Private schools were a small number. And by the way, you have private schools in every country. You can't banish them. They are there. But even in countries where you have private schools, there's a basic minimum in public school. Basic minimum that you get. If you elect to take, because you have money, you want to go to and get some extra, fair enough. But we don't compromise on the basic minimum. And that's the argument I'm making. We should not compromise on the basic minimum. It should not be the case. And take the minimum that a child goes to school and gets to grade 6 and cannot read and write. That statistics, to me, is worrying. No child in Ghana should go to school and end up in primary 6 and cannot read and write. And it's not a problem it takes years to fix. I've done research in many countries. We fix it in a year. So why are we still talking about, and you don't know how much it costs the government for a child to go to school to primary school and not read and write. You compute the cost. The teachers who were paid, the books, and all of that. It's a huge cost. Now, you think it's not a cost to you, the elite and the urban. It's a cost to you, to your taxes and other things. So this is the point I think we need to make for our politicians. Look, development is not development if you are not attending to this. It's an illusion of development, what we see, okay? Because the political elite are very clever. Honorable said it. They will talk about free SHS, but they will set up their businesses. They will set up a school that collects money, okay? It is the reason why I'm saying that if you do development so that the political elite, the elite maximize the benefit from development, they will not invest in the majority. It's a human thing. If you come into some money and you want to make profits, and you won't build, and you want to, you build houses for those who you think can give you that money. It's a human thing. So I think we need to return to that. We need to tell our politicians and our lawmakers, look, we need to change the discourse around development. Okay, we need to change that. Investing in education is not a trivial matter. Okay? The rapid signs that we see about development, without that investment that closes that gap, is an illusion. And that, if we don't pay the price for that, we would still there. Okay? And then we expect the teachers will be posted from the central to that place. When that teacher doesn't know anything about living in that community, okay, and you attend there, you don't speak the language, you don't know about the community, how do you expect that, you know? So after 2-3 days, they make an arrangement and they run out of the place. Okay. We have to then get the, so in response to the demand thing, we need bright spots. There's no point me making all this argument when we cannot prove that. If you have a district, and I always challenge policymakers in it, look, I want to see a district which is different. Every child going to in that district, you can see there's something happening there. That is what will drive behavior change. Okay, if you are what's happening in that district, all the children there, what is going on there, that is what will drive the behavior change. But if we don't have stories to tell, look at Ghana now. Which district would you say doesn't have a learning crisis in the way I've described it? Which district? Okay, where can we point to? We're not talking about the private schools. You go into an area where you see that there is real development. The schools are functioning. Public schools are functioning. Even people are taking their children from the private school and taking them into the public school. That is what will drive the change. Okay? And that will drive development. Then you won't get the people in the rural areas trying to come to Accra because they see potential. They see the investment that is there. So when you invest in health and agriculture, you are investing indirectly in education. Because if people there see that, okay, if I go to have an education, I don't have to come to Accra. I can contribute to that development in that sector. So I think it is a lot of things I've said. It's not, many people would agree. I'm not surprised. The challenge is doing it. It goes back to the equity thing. You have to lose something. Now, those of you here, I don't know, what are you willing to lose? That's the question. Don't think I'm a politician. You yourself, what are you willing to lose? Are you willing to take public transport? A functioning public transport. You know, anytime I'm driving from where I stay in Ikropon, I'm coming, I keep asking myself, why is it not possible that between the hours of 7 and, say, 9, there's a dedicated lane that I can park my vehicle there, jump on it, within 20 minutes I'm in Accra. You know, if you're able to do that, you know what is going to happen? A lot of people will put their park there and join it, and they are guaranteed that they will get to Accra. Okay? Even don't talk about train, because that one we haven't even reached there at all. Just make it possible. You know how much we lose in sitting in vehicles and not working. You can't have more than 2 meetings in Accra, because by the time you have to rush back. And if we can have a bus that runs down that lane, we reduce pollution. Okay? But you see, I've heard over the years, we have buses that have been. The problem is not the buses. Governments can secure those buses. The problem is making sure that when you get onto that bus, it will take you to where you want to go, at the time you want to go it. And that is where you have to have that dedication. But we have to be able to enforce the laws. And then the behavior will change. We'll leave our vehicles and then drive. So it is not that we don't know what to do. It is our willingness to take that action. So that I don't see, you drive a 4-wheel drive. In the UK, I dare not drive a 4-wheel drive. Not because I can't. It will cost me a lot of money. You know, when the Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana came to visit University of Sasa, where I was there, and he came, and I was taking him around Professor, and I said, everybody who works in the university, when we come to the university, we pay to park our vehicles. We pay. The Vice Chancellor himself is paying. The Vice Chancellor of the university doesn't have a driver. He uses the train. I sit with him in the train and we go there. Because the train is more efficient than him driving. It's not that he doesn't enjoy sitting in his car, but it is more efficient. It gets him to the place. We should do the same with education. We should not talk about investing in education when we don't see any results. If you talk about public education, And the public education, we are saying that the public education, we are investing in public education, and I don't see a result. Why should I put my money into that? You know? So I think I've tried to summarize quite a bit of what you're saying and say that my challenge is to our political elite and our leaders is that you have to believe in a model of development that is not just simply about the things we talk about. It's about investing in the human capital. Okay, but investing in the human capital is not investing in the few who get through. Investing in maximizing the human capital. And I don't think we believe that. And I'm submitting to all of us that in any country that has achieved maximum will not develop us. It will make us more dependent. You know, so why are we leaving so many of our people behind? And we call that development. I think we need to question ourselves. But we also hold to hold the political class into account. When they promised us free SHS, many people supported it. It's a good thing. But we should have said no. At the time, those who should have gone on the streets and said, we'll pay. It's not equitable. It's not a good policy. Yes, we want the underprivileged to have it, but we should find a way of not doing it. And you think it's important. I was in Rwanda. I was doing some work in Rwanda in the late 90s and 2000. You know what they had? They had something like this thing. But the villages, because in the village they are rich people. It's not everybody in the village who is poor. And then they decided that, okay, in the village, now this thing, A, B, C, D, you will not benefit from it. They know themselves. So they say, you are out. These are the people. So it's not people, they are not stupid. People can actually do this if you trust that they can make those decisions. So I think it kind of picks on some of the many of the things. And then finally, I think you talk about harmonizing and pedagogy. One of the things that disturbs me about Ghana, Ghana is one of the countries where you can walk in and try and introduce anything. And we accept it because it comes a little bit of money. We are confusing our teachers. You know, I've led teams to work in Ethiopia. I don't know whether it's because they were not colonized like us. Even as an African, they look at me with suspicion. I thought I was an African, so they will see, oh, these are fellow Africans. They said, no, what are you bringing to our system here? We don't question anything. We don't question anything. There are so many innovations, interventions, you know, all over the place. But we as a people, what is it that we want? We should be able to say, okay, fair enough, we don't want this. They will not go there. They will not go away, by the way. Don't think if you say we don't want it, they will take their money away. They will stay. Because they need you more than you need them. Okay? But we don't have a policy around what we will take. So everybody comes with jolly phonics, pedagogy by this, by that, and you go around, and the teachers are confused. And they are confusing the children. Okay? So you go to the ministries, what is our policy? What is our policy? So if we have our policy, somebody comes in and says, no, this is what we want. If it doesn't align, please take your money away. By the way, they won't take their money. They will come and align. Okay. We have to have the boldness. You know, when we worked in Ethiopia and then we found out that we're getting the children to complete and doing well, and we took the people from the ministry to look at the speech schools there, the ministry said, this is going to be our policy. They were going to use their own money to do it. In Rwanda, after the genocide, I went with a team with the World Bank, and we modeled for them that to be able to have massified the education system, they had double shift. You remember Ghana, we had double shift. And we had to do something about that double shift and then build more schools. When we developed the model with to the Ministry of the World Bank team, I was included, and we went to the Ministry of Finance and we showed it to them. And the minister was there, and he said it would take Rwanda about maybe 15, 20 years to build the primary schools and everything. I remember the minister, and they looked at me and said, this model that you have designed with the World Bank, he said 15. We don't have 15 years to wait. You know what they did? He said, we will do it. They built all those schools within 2 years. Everybody in their community, every weekend, they were going to their villages and towns to help build schools. They used local materials. I went back, they said, Professor Champo, you said it takes 15 years. Go and see, we built all the schools. They did it. It didn't take anything. It didn't take that money that the World Bank had. They found ways to build the schools because they believed in that investment. And it's the same thing. You know, And I think it is, those of you who have gone to Rwanda, you see that their commitment, and they are very serious, because they know that the benefit that education will provide for them and how it will change their development. So I would like to, in terms of kind of summarizing, my submission to ask everybody here is that, look, we need to begin to have a different discourse around our development model, okay? That is hinged on education. That is also about social justice. Social justice has benefits for all of us. And we need to get the political class and the elites to understand that what they have as development is really not development. Because the model of development we are practicing in Ghana, where we have inequitable development, is one that collapses into itself and makes us more dependent on foreign assistance. And that is not development. We should stop. We should get to the point where we are not depending on people coming to tell us what. And by the way, like I showed with these mothers, the solutions are here. We have solutions. We have done many experiments over the years. We have the answers. Let's return to them, and I'm sure that we can address them. So I hope in a way, you talk about reading in the colleges. I have studied teacher education. One of the reasons why I didn't understand why the children were not able to read. You go to a training college. How many of you have been to a training college? Honorable, maybe when you were there, I'm sure things were done very different from now. We have turned our colleges into lecturing. And I went to study what the teacher in a training college, how much time does the teacher spend in learning how to teach reading? You go and find out. Very, very little time. They have become higher education institutions. So reading has become something that is not. But reading is the foundation. Basic numeracy is the foundation. And they've left all of that to the development when you come out as a teacher before you go to some workshops and get more confused. It should start with our colleges. No teacher should leave the college without being able to help a child to read within 6 months. And that investment we are making in the colleges and the students, it will pay dividends. It shouldn't be the case that a child leaves, I was telling the school, when a child is in grade 1 and gets to grade 6 and cannot read, it's an indictment on the school and the head teacher. It should be held responsible. The government has spent money. They paid people's salaries. Whether the salary is enough or not is another matter. You've collected some money. Got to the end, the child cannot read. It's an investment. If you're a businessman or a businesswoman, would you do that business? You have a business, you're pouring money into it, and then the outcome is this. You would not behave like that. So I think the challenge for me and the call for us is to always ask the question when we talk about policymakers about equity. And not just talk it. We like policy documents and policies. Show me show me where is it being practiced. How much resources is going into the areas where we need to give resources. Category B and Category C school. How much resource do they get? Those top schools that are getting that amount of money. How much is the school next in the B and C getting? What incentive are you providing for B and C school so that a teacher, if I have to choose between going to A, B, and C, I'll go to B and C? It's behavior. If I go to Category C school and I'll be able to use that as a leverage to improve my promotion, I'll go there. Okay, so let's incentivize that. Don't say that you should go there. When I stay in Accra, I can get some benefit, and I should go to Achurubanda and don't get any benefit. I'm not going to go there. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I know time is fast spent, and I would like us to leave here in the next 10 minutes, not more than that. So please make your submissions, your questions very brief.
Has even touched on it, but
after a minute, I'll cut you.
Yeah, somebody representing the teachers. I feel that the problem starts from deployment. Somebody studies, is a gang, completes College of Education, then you post them to boom, 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 yo, yo. He doesn't understand the language. He's here, he uses electricity, everything. He goes there, these things are not there. Even mobile phone, he can't get. Then again, he teaches for 1 year, 2 years without salary. So already, what are you telling the person who has entered the job? What kind of mentality and the psychology that is he entering? Then again, when they come, we have something we call teacher autonomy, issues that we are talking about. I have a friend who was sent to a school. He was teaching class, and the children could not read. And so let me use my time to help the children to read before we move on. The second supervisor comes and says, no, use the class 6 syllabus or curriculum. So the challenge is that the teachers themselves, already the teachers, when they get there, they're already frustrated. So please, one of the areas that I want us, if we want to get this equity thing work, is also look at the teacher. How many of them are they even prepared to move? Because somebody might come from Bunkuru who wants to be there. But you don't send the person, you send the person here. You send somebody, fraud, deployment is a problem. And then the teacher autonomy. If I'm in a classroom, you have given these children to me to handle. What do I do in terms of curriculum, in terms of pedagogy, and in terms of the motivation and other things that we are talking about? Local area examples and others. Now the curriculum is trying to bring in a bit of our own systems here. But we are here, we learn history of America and even our own common Ashanti history, we don't know. So maybe some of these things, but I believe that the teacher point is very, very critical. Okay. How many of us want our children to be teachers? We don't want them to do because of the condition of service that exists. So maybe one of the biggest areas I want to address as a union person is that let's look at the condition of the teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh,
So
I'm really enlightened by Prof this afternoon. Prof, your lecture is really thought-provoking. Yeah, thought-provoking lecture indeed. I sat down here quietly listening, and all other ideas expounded by participants. And something came to mind that I would like to find out. You see, first of all, our problem here in Ghana, as expounded, if you are talking about politicians, all that they are interested in is in power. Power is just power they are interested in. They will come today, tell you this, tell you that, all of them. At the end of the day, we don't see what they are supposed to do. That is why things have remained the way they are. Look at all the problems that you have expounded. It tells you that no, our politics system is not helping us. Now, I would like to find out, of all that we have been told about education, of what use? Because I have been on a panel before this thing came up. Because this whole system was designed just to take advantage of us Ghanaians. They tell you that education is the key. But when you go to school, you complete everything. You are thinking about getting a job. At the end of the day, that is when you know that there is no key. You have been lied to. Sometimes let's speak the truth. Okay. Let's look them in their faces and tell them the honest truth. They have taken us for granted for so long a time. Okay. Sometimes I get angry. I get angry because you go, you spend all the money. Look at, you're a mother. You send your children to school hoping that they will come out one day and become somebody. They come out of school, masters, they come and sit down in the house eating your food. How do you feel? It's okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Womako. Very animated. No, I think we can't take any more. We can't take any more.
I think this is for another, because that is also an issue that I think we need to address about what education is giving us. And, but I think, if we are getting people coming out and they can't get jobs, that's an issue. The world is changing very, very fast. My concern is that we are not reorienting our education system to take advantage of the world that is coming. It's rapidly changing. In education, we are doing things as if the world has not changed. So I would challenge the curriculum developers to really think about it, because education where you sit, I stand here now to lecture to you, that time has passed. It has completely passed. And so we need to really, really think. But it's for another, so I wouldn't get into that. Thank you very much for all your contributions here. Okay.
Thank you very much. I see some hands up, but unfortunately we cannot take them. Prof is still available after the event for you to engage him.
Kwame Champong again. Very thought-provoking address on education. And what I like about it is also the fact that it's really a whole ecosystem that he's challenging us to interrogate. It's not, you remember that when he talked about education, even though that's the focus, we still ended up talking about health. We ended up really talking about social justice, positively discriminating in favor of the least of us, right? The least privileged. And that is something that I think we really are moving away from more and more. And it cuts across, right? So when you look at our development trajectory, it seems to be increasingly doing things that favor the rich, the more powerful, the privileged, right? It's difficult to access the country, most parts by road, but we want to build airports so that we can fly over the problem and not see it and not confront it. I mean, I haven't been to Kumasi in probably how many months since I buried my dad. I haven't even found it possible to go there because I only travel by road for the most part. And I don't go to Kumasi by air. I've probably gone there only once in my lifetime. And just going there. And yet people are happy. The citizens are happy when you build them an airport. So how have we come to align our interests with the interests of the elite? I mean, you are deprived, you want something, and it's everywhere, right? It's in public housing. State Housing Corporation is building the type of apartments that you're seeing. State Housing Corporation is also building some for the elite. State Housing Corporation should be building affordable housing. But they are building upscale housing, these apartments, they're also building some. Right? So it cuts across. Everywhere you look, we are making decisions without thinking about social justice and leaving the majority behind. Right? So I think this is really thought-provoking. It also, of course, got me thinking. Initially, I said our job at CDD is to bridge knowledge and power. But there's something missing. I think Honorable supplied it in his remarks, which is interest. The people with power also have knowledge. These statistics are there. They are available. They have access to Professor Echampong. They have access to the other technocrats. They have access to consultants. So they have the knowledge. Why don't they do it? It's interest. The interest is what part of it, he supplied the answer. They themselves are educational entrepreneurs. They have invested in private schools, right? So they take their kids there. You know, and that's the difference between my time and this time. When the managing director and the MP for Tema and all of them, when I sat in the same class with their kids and my principals, I mean, we were all in the same boat together. Now it's very different, right? And that is challenging. Some of the investments we need to make in education to make this possible. For example, free SHS. I had this big debate at the time, you know. They say, oh, but we can't do, we don't know who is poor and who is rich. The reason we can't positively discriminate in favor of the poor is that we don't have the data. So we can't do means testing. In the countries that you are talking about, they do means testing. They can look at your income tax statement and say that, okay, you benefit from free HSS, you pay. But here we don't. Why don't we? Because we don't want to invest in it. We don't want to do means testing. But we have proxies. We can start with some proxy and say that if you went to this school, you can presume. If you went to Saito, if you went to Kotobabi, number 1, we can presume that you are not rich, and therefore we give you access to boarding school. If you went to GIS, assuming you are even interested, no, if you went to one of those primary schools, we assume that you are poor, you are rich until you can prove that you are not, and then we will take, yeah. So you start with some proxies. We can use some proxies, right? We can look at the schools you are coming from to see that you can benefit from boarding school. The other must pay something towards boarding school if you want your kids to go to boarding school. You know, I benefited from boarding school, but for a long time, actually, I felt some discomfort about the fact that it must be available to everybody for free. I have never really felt that it's something that should be available to everybody for free. And that thought of it dawned on me when I was in the US and visited a primary school, a private school, Phillips Exeter, very elite school. In the US, every school is public, except a few. I was shocked at what I saw at the private school. And these are, I was shocked at what I saw at the boarding school, right? Every school in the US is public day for everybody. If you want boarding school, you go to Phillips Exeter or Andover and you pay. And the facilities, this is like the children of, these are like foundation owners' kids, Ford and Carnegie and those guys. But if you didn't go to those schools and you went to a public school, you would do just fine also, which is what he's talking about. And so those boarding schools in the US are for only elite kids, super, super elite. Most of the middle class, most of the elites, their kids are in public day schools. That's where it is, right? So this idea that we have to do boarding for everybody, free food for everybody, it might look fair, but it is not. It is not fair to the poor. That is what the Professor Champon is telling us about. That equity is where the social justice debate must be had. Is it fair to say that I can afford to pay something towards the education of my kid at a senior high school, but that, well, the policy is that nobody should pay. Nobody should pay anything, So I think, we have been seduced, the majority of citizens have been seduced into almost aligning our interest with the interest of the wealthy and the powerful. And it is not. We should advocate. This is why, we are in the kind of work that we're doing. We continue to advocate for policies that improve the lot of the majority. We have to. We have to. We don't have a choice. We have to. And ultimately, if the roads are good for all of us, it's good. It's for the majority. It's good for all of us. If we have public transport, as we did in my days, Omnibus Services Authority, we all went through buses, and so things are getting worse. I looked at my childhood and I looked at the childhood of the kids today. It's like, I had public transportation. I went to Kumasi on a sleeper train. How come you guys don't have it? And I'm not Methuselah, right? I'm not as young as I look, but I'm not Methuselah. This has happened in my lifetime. And here, things are getting worse. And people think it's normal. It is not normal. It is not normal at all. Really, what is happening here is not normal, right? So I think it's a very important message, a very important clarion call for us to really prioritize social justice. Advocate positively for policies that favor the least of us, because all of us will benefit that way. The boat that would lift the least of us is the one that is likely to lift all of us. If it lifts only a few people, flying them through whatever, I like to go to an airport named after my great-grandfather. But, is that how many of you can do that between Accra and Kumasi? Advocate for more, but the things that you all will enjoy and not be happy. I'll vote for a government because they built an airport in my town. What is that? Right? So we thank you for this really thought-provoking, but also it provokes more than thought. Right? It's to provoke action. Right? Please join us again in thanking Professor Kwabena Champon for this. And at CDD, we want more action. We want more action. Thought is good. It's good for your thought to be provoked, but please, when it comes to action, join us also. When you hear that we're advocating for something, it's not because, it's for us personally. Some of us can do just fine, seriously speaking. But is it good enough, right? That you can afford to send your kids to private school and therefore everybody's kids who is in public school, you shouldn't worry about it. So, it's really a wake-up call for all of us. We should think about this across the board, in transportation, in health, in education, in housing. Every place, the problem he's talking about is everywhere. That's why he's challenging us to change our thinking around development, around the models we are using. They don't work.